And you probably have been paying attention to lots of really, recent news in November on China's participation in APEC, in the East Asia Summit as well as the G20, where there has been a lot of, big announcement coming out from those three major multilateral, summits on the highest level. So what are the, announcement which interests you most as like a construction, sector leader?
Well, look, I think the most important thing to me is that underpinning all of those, most of those statements was the issue about free trade and encouraging international collaboration, because I think that's what makes the world a safer place and a better place for all of us. So if we can actually encourage that, then we are really doing something positive. And I think over time, where I would like to see the UK-China relationship going in terms of trade, it's not just about selling into each other's markets, it's actually about working together in third markets. And Xi Jinping has made that point on a number of occasions. And from the UK side, we're trying to identify and collaborate with Chinese partners to take advantage of those opportunities.
I completely agree with you, because I remember when Premier Li Keqiang was down in London as part of his official visit, he highlighted quite a few times exactly in the same way. You have just mentioned how important it is for UK and Chinese company to collaborate to access market outside both countries. And I think Lord James Sassoon, very close colleagues of you in your previous role in China-Britain Business Council, also start to look at ways to try to support this strategy, from a more bottom-up way.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And Lord Sassoon and has been instrumental in actually emphasising the importance of this from the British side. And you're quite right. Wen Jiabao was the first to mention it as a Chinese initiative, and I'm very happy that Xi Jinping is also taking this forward. And I think in recent interchanges between our senior leaders, there is a warmth and a sense of partnership which is continuing to mature, and I think it's good for both of us to move down this road.
Of course, it sounds like a massive win-win solutions on both sides.
Absolutely.
To try to combine the skills and network and the mindset to try to collaborate for the benefits of prosperity between two countries and probably beyond.
Absolutely. And I think you could argue that the relationship between the UK and China has been slower to start, but then perhaps the skill set that we have in the UK, in creative industries, in technology, in research, in environmental science, these are things which are becoming more important now, and therefore perhaps the next round of development is going to be very much focused in Europe on the UK rather than on some of our other partners.
Of course. And talking about all these kind of exciting investments, you probably noticed another major announcement from our president, Mr. Xi Jinping, and he was talking about China would like to establish the Silk Road Fund of $40 billion to try to support infrastructure investment in countries who are involved in the One Belt and One Road plan, which you mentioned briefly before. And this proposal is in addition to the new Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which already have 21 countries signed up to it. So presumably a large amount of the project funding will go to infrastructure like railways, roads, airport, ports, which Arup has been very famous for internationally. So do your company will involve in any of the projects proposed by President Xi Jinping in the near future?
I hope so. No, but we are also very active in the ASEAN region.
ASEAN, yeah.
And I think it's a hugely exciting initiative. And if we look at the potential of, you just take Indonesia as an example, 240 plus million people, the most populous Muslim country in the world, Islamic country in the world. You know, the potential there is huge, and it's huge for China. It's huge for the UK, but most importantly, it's to actually improve the quality of life of Indonesian people, and I think we can make a tremendous contribution, and the sum of the parts will be greater than the whole, you know.
Of course, I thought that would be truly exciting.
Yeah.
And talking about, you know, a lot of investment on the infrastructure, another kind of, you know, area which a lot of, you know, international leaders looking at this moment is about climate change. And you probably noticed another major outcome from the APEC, you know, conference recently is that China has reached a major landmark, you know, agreement with the United States on tackling climate change, which specifies a very, you know, clear timetable for emission reduction, which is very important. And also China is also announcing the establishment of the South-to-South Cooperation Fund to help developing countries to tackle climate change. So Arup, of course, as a global leader for engineering, what do you think, you know, your company could do to support emerging countries like China to fight climate change?
Okay. Well, I take issue with your own point. I don't view China as an emerging country.
Okay.
In many areas of sustainable design, green technology, China is actually a world leader now. If you look at things like biomass, photovoltaics, the sort of work that's being done on planning new cities, planning manufacturing and production processes. Now, China, of course, relies heavily on coal for its energy, but I think it's making strident steps to move to a more balanced energy delivery system. And in many ways, Chinese strategy is more developed than in many places in what is so-called the developed world. So I think China is, in a sense, leading the way. And it's great to see the United States actually articulating a reduced carbon, reduced emissions strategy. And I think we are starting to move down the right road. And as far as the developing world is concerned, there's an awful lot that's got to be done. I mean, we at Arup are working on looking at developing resilience into underdeveloped economies, so that when you have these very dramatic changes in weather patterns with flooding, earthquakes, all of these things affect people in underdeveloped countries in a far more dramatic way than they do in the developed world. And making some very simple planning decisions about where you build houses, whether you elevate structures, all of these things can have a dramatic impact on a post-event scenario. So we're doing quite a lot of work in that area to help mitigate these sorts of effects. So, yeah, but there's an awful lot more to do, and China is doing a lot, is helping a lot.
Yeah, and actually I heard that this year in September you have your chairman who are actually invited by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to have a discussion about our vision for cities with respect to mitigating and managing, you know, a global climate change.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there is this huge migration of the global population to cities, and no more so than in China. I mean, we presently have about 50% of the world's population living in large cities. By 2050, it's going to be in excess of 70%. And that actually gives us amazing opportunities, because as we concentrate populations, it gives us the opportunity to reduce carbon footprints by moving away from the car, from carbon fuels, into mass transit, into electrically driven vehicles, and enabling us to plan these spaces in a much more effective way. So people live closer to where they work. They don't travel huge distances. And our buildings are designed in a far more efficient way to minimise the use of energy. And if you don't have noisy cars running around, you can open windows to ventilate rather than having to use forced ventilation systems. So all of these things need to be brought together. But that's for the new stuff. There's also a huge amount of things that we can do in the older buildings that we see around us. So much energy is wasted because buildings are not insulated properly, they're not used properly. So actually bringing all these things together in a strategic way will enable us to reduce the carbon emissions, reduce climate change, and essentially make sure that we use resources in a more efficient and a more effective way.